Hi there, thanks for joining us. Today we're going to be talking about the eBusiness Suite Supplier Management solution. My name is Mark Peachey. I run the product management team at within the Oracle Development Group, and I'm joined by my colleague Siva, who's going to be presenting some of the content that we're discussing today. In terms of our agenda for the session, what we wanted to do was spend a few minutes talking about some of the business challenges that organizations face around the supplier management area. And then once we've looked at that, we wanted to dive then into some of the detail around the solution that we provide. I think the interesting thing here is that we have a number of different modules that we use to provide the overall supplier management solution. So we wanted to sort of walk through that, look at how each of those contribute to the overall solution that we have. Once we've done that, we're then going to go into some of the product roadmap details, look at some of the enhancements that have been delivered over the last 12 months, and then spend a bit of time talking about some of the things that we are planning to add to the product over the coming months. And as during that session, we'll actually have a product demonstration which will actually look at some of those features in a little more detail. And then once we've done that, we wanted to come back and just spend a final few minutes talking about one of the partners that we work with in the area of supplier management. And this is a company called Transceptor, and they really help with some of the stuff to do with the supplier enablement challenges that a lot of organizations face within the supplier management sphere. So with that said, let's jump into the business challenge section. And as I say, what I wanted to do now is just talk through some of the typical sorts of issues that organizations have around supplier management and why there's as we see it, growing interest in this area for a lot of organizations. So we really broke this down into three key areas. Starting at the top, I think one of the real driving forces for organizations around why they're interested in supplier management is all to do with risk. If you look at, I guess, the effects of the downturn that happened starting in sort of 2008, 2009, a lot of organizations became much more aware of the dangers, I guess, involved in some of the relationships they have with the trading partners that they work with. And they recognized that there was a need within the organization to do a much better job of sort of tracking and being able to monitor the risks involved in all those types of relationships. So this is sort of one of the key drivers that we see a lot of organizations asking us about in terms of how our solution can help them manage the risk elements involved in the relationships that they have. One of the other areas, and I guess it's sort of a counter to that, is really the issue of performance management. Obviously, where you've established a good relationship with a supplier that you're happy with, then being able to measure and monitor how well that supplier is performing is sort of a really key element of being able to monitor and manage the relationship in a proactive manner. And this is really to do with a lot of the sort of qualitative feedback that you can get about how well that supplier is performing for you. So not the quantitative elements of are they delivering the right goods on time at the right price and those sorts of things. This is more to do with being able to track the sentiment within the organization about how well that supplier is performing for you as a business. And again, that's a challenging thing to do for an organization, and so a lot of customers are interested in how we can help facilitate that sort of capability. And the last area, or the last challenge that organizations face, is really just around the whole cost aspect of this. I think there have been studies that have been done that tell you that for every supplier that you may have inside your supplier master, there is potentially hundreds of dollars of costs that you incur on an annual basis looking after all of the information to do with that supplier and managing the electronic relationship with that supplier. So I think organizations are now really sort of focusing around how much does it cost me to sort of manage all of the suppliers that I do business with, and are there things that can help me do that in a more cost-effective manner. So what we're going to do now is look at some of the things that organizations face in terms of the challenges that make it difficult to put in place a comprehensive sort of supplier management solution. And we've broken these down into four areas. I think one of the ones that's really important, and we start in the sort of the bottom right corner here, is around data fragmentation. I think we have a lot of customers that come to us and say, the information about all of our suppliers is split across multiple systems all over the organization, and getting all of that data to a point where we can actually understand who are the people that we're actually doing business with is really challenging for the organization. So that whole problem of data fragmentation really can make it difficult to manage the relationships you have with suppliers effectively. As part of that, with that data fragmentation, you have the associated issue of, poor visibility. You may be tracking different pieces of information about the suppliers that you work with, and that may be being recorded in different systems that are accessible to different groups or different communities of users across your organization. So, with that poor visibility, because only certain people can see certain parts of the information, that creates a real challenge around supplier management for organizations. In addition to that, we have the obvious challenge about how you sort of track risk and compliance details around the suppliers themselves. So, you may have multiple parts of the organization that are trying to find out whether, suppliers have insurance certificates or have particular compliance documentation. Part of your business may manage to get hold of that, but then making sure that that becomes available to other parts of the organization and doing that in a cost-effective manner can certainly be very challenging. And the last area is really, based on all of these factors, it's just an expensive process to look after all of the information about the suppliers that you do business with and track all of that sort of extended profile about those organizations so that you can have a better understanding of whether you've got, good relationships that you want to foster or whether you have concerns about the relationship with a particular supplier. Okay, so within the Oracle portfolio, within the business suite, we have a number of solutions that we can use to help you with that sort of overall supplier management challenge. And this slide really gives you a graphic that illustrates the relationships between those different products, because there is certainly overlap in terms of some of the capabilities, but the whole idea is that all of these solutions complement each other in order to provide you with a comprehensive supplier management solution. So what I'm going to do now is I'm actually going to walk through each of the key components that we have around supplier management. I'll start with the tools that we use essentially for the collaboration aspect of how you exchange business information with suppliers, and then I'll look into the tools that really can be used to manage the sort of qualification and evaluation activities that you may undertake with the suppliers that you work with. Okay, so if we look at the two products that we have that really help with supplier collaboration, we have the iSupplier portal product, something that we introduced back around 1996, 1997. And this is a portal tool that allows you to give suppliers online access to essentially all of the business documents that you share with that organization through a portal. In addition to that, we then released a product called the Oracle Supplier Network, which we delivered around 2004, which was intended to provide a platform for exchanging business documents electronically with those suppliers who have that sort of capability within their organization. So just looking at these each in a little more detail, if I was to describe the portal, I think it really provides two key functions for an organization. The first thing is it helps with the management of business transactions. So suppliers can view purchase orders, they can provide acknowledgements to those purchase orders, they can provide you with shipping notifications, and they can enter online invoices by taking purchase order information and flipping that into an invoice document. Obviously this works well for low volume suppliers and those that do sort of sporadic levels of business with you. But one of the challenges we had with the portal is that once you start to get above a certain volume of business documents, then suppliers' enthusiasm for entering that in a portal tends to wane. The other element of the portal that's really key, and I think is something that is actually useful for any size of supplier regardless of the volume of business documents that they exchange with your organization, is really the inquiry capabilities that you get through the portal. So any supplier can log in and they can get access to exactly the same information as people within the purchasing function or people inside the payables function can look at. So they can get very, very up-to-date status information on purchase orders that they've received, invoices they've submitted, payments that may be scheduled, details of what those payments covered. So, great access to really current information that really reduces the amount of call volume that a lot of organizations see from their suppliers. And we have, some good examples where customers have been able essentially to close down the phone lines that they use in the payables department because they now have suppliers getting all of the details that they need through the portal. If we look in more detail at some of those capabilities, this really shows you how the portal allows suppliers to get access to all of the information throughout the whole procure-to-pay cycle. So all of the details around that initial order collaboration, including the ability for the supplier to send in change requests if they want to change a purchase order, and that can then be routed through to a requester in the organization, or if necessary go to a buyer in order to get reviewed and approved. In addition to that, we have all of the functionality around shipment of goods, where the suppliers can provide advanced notification of shipments that they're intending to send to the buyer, which is obviously great where the buyer needs that sort of information to help with their planning processes. And then the last area is really around settlement. So again, suppliers able to go in, check purchase orders, and then flip those into invoices, submit them into the buying organization. With the functionality we have there, we also allow for non-purchase order backed invoices to be submitted should you be in the situation where suppliers don't necessarily have an order document for the original supply. Okay, the other side of the portal that's sort of really important is, I guess, mainly around all of the profile management capabilities that are delivered. And this really allows suppliers to gain access to the identity information that you as a buying organization are holding about them, and then keep all of that information up to date. So we support a basic registration flow where suppliers can indicate their interest in doing business with the buyer. And we also then have that profile, so suppliers can gain access to their address, contact, business classification, product and service, banking details. They can look at all of that, check that it's all current, and where necessary they can make changes and then submit those into folks within the buying organization for approval. And the last area is really around being able to allow the supplier just to take a look at some of the performance information for their organization. So as I said earlier, one of the challenges we face, certainly on the transactional side with the portal, is that it's good for low volume suppliers, but once you start to move into the situation where you have a higher volume of business, so suppliers that may be doing tens of orders a day or tens of invoices a day, then processing that through the portal becomes somewhat more challenging. And for that, we introduced the Oracle Supplier Network, and this is a platform that's provided free of charge to Oracle procurement customers that allows them to exchange documents electronically with those suppliers, be that outbound purchase orders or invoice documents coming back into the organization. And I think we've seen steady growth with this product, and we have a fair number of buying organizations now that use this to interact with maybe their top 15 or top 20 suppliers in terms of being able to do that sort of business document exchange. One of the challenges we've seen, though, is that once you get beyond that initial, say, 20 suppliers, then the number of suppliers that have the capability to do electronic document transmission drops off dramatically. And one of the things that we've done here is partnered with a third party to provide a solution that really helps with the full complement of suppliers that you may wish to exchange documents with. And I'm going to come back to that towards the end of the session in order to discuss that in more detail. So those are the two solutions that we really provide around business transactions and some of the basic profile management. The other elements to the solution that we have for supplier management are really around the new applications that we delivered in 2010, which is the Supplier Lifecycle Management and the Supplier Hub tool. And these really help you as an organization do a much more extensive job around the qualification, the evaluation, the compliance tracking, and sort of the governance of all the information that you have about the suppliers that you work with. So just looking at those in a little more detail, if I start with the Supplier Lifecycle Management tool, this is really helping you look after the entire life cycle of the relationship that you have with the supplier, or I guess with the prospects as well that you may eventually have a relationship with. And in this instance, SLM provides tools that allow you to do very sophisticated registration processes so that you can do extensive qualification internally of the suppliers that you may be working with. You can gather a lot of information, and you can then route that through the organization to all of the key people or the key departments that need to be involved in reviewing that information in order to decide whether a prospective supplier is somebody that you may wish to enter into a relationship with. In addition to that, it provides all the tools around performance evaluation, so you can then canvass feedback from internal stakeholders and find out what they think about the relationship that the buying organization has with the supplier, how well that supplier is performing from a qualitative basis, and therefore whether there are any issues they see with maintaining that relationship. And we think those are sort of key tools that you should be using as part of the the contract and negotiation cycles, because obviously armed with that information, that can really help when you're coming up to the point where a supplier may be coming to the end of their contract. You want to review that with them, and you're going to see whether you're going to try and renegotiate with them, or whether you're going to roll the contract over because you're happy with the relationship. So SLM, a great tool for sort of managing, as I say, that whole life cycle, looking after qualification and looking after performance and compliance evaluation. The other element to the solution is the Supplier Hub that we provide, and this is a master data management application that really helps you to look after all of the supplier record information across your organization, keep it clean, and then find all of the critical profile elements, I guess, that you have stored across the company for a supplier, and use those to generate a single golden record that represents, the ultimate set of information about that supplier. There are also tools in there that help you to establish information about the relationships that you have with suppliers, so you can start to model the different subsidiaries that you may be doing business with and working out how all of the business rolls up to a parent supplier, so that you can then be in a situation to affect a much more effective negotiation strategy with them based on the volume of business that you may be doing. So combined, iSupplier Portal, Supplier Network, Supplier Lifecycle Management and Supplier Hub, they really provide all of the tools that we consider to be our supplier management solution that we make available to customers to help them with the processes of looking after the relationships they have. So with that, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to hand over to Siva, and he's going to walk you through roadmap information. So we're going to look at features that we've added into the product inside the last 12 months. We'll do a demonstration then of some of the new enhancements that we're working on, and talk through some of the more detailed future directions that we have within the next 12 months from there. Okay, Siva.
Thanks, Mark. We will now go into the product roadmap of supplier management solutions, which will be followed by a short demonstration of the features that are to be released in the near future. What you see here is the product roadmap for supplier management solutions. Before we get into the details, I would like to talk about 4 key themes or guiding principles which helps us in identifying the features that need to go into the product. The first theme is on improving usability, which we believe will result in improved user experience and product satisfaction. The next theme is on improving productivity, which will obviously result in improved effectiveness and efficiency for both the buying organization as well as for the supplier organization. The third theme is on automation of the process, and the fourth theme is on traceability and security. With these 4 themes in mind, we identified the list of features that need to go into the product and categorized those features under 3 different buckets. The first bucket lists the features that are delivered in the last 1 year. To be precise, the features that are delivered after the last OpenWorld are listed under bucket 1. The second bucket lists the features what we plan to deliver in the 0 to 12 months planning cycle. And the third bucket lists the features what we want to do post 12 months planning cycle, the future direction, and where we want to take the product in the future. So with this background, let us go into the list of features that are delivered in the last 1 year. What you see here is the list of features that are delivered in the last 1 year. We will see what are all the enhancements, the business problems what we are solving, the business benefits that we get out of these features. This slide will give you a complete picture of the enhancements that are delivered in the last 1 year in the supplier onboarding process. So I am going to talk about 3 key enhancements that will improve the supplier onboarding experience as such. The first one is on streamlined registration process. The prospective supplier will now be able to specify all the related information in a more structured, intuitive and user-friendly way. The tray navigation will help the prospective supplier to navigate across different nodes to provide the required details. Clubbing of information under different nodes will help in better usability and improved product satisfaction. The next enhancement what I want to talk about is on approval routing. So once a prospective supplier registration process is complete, a notification will be sent to the buying organization This notification is enhanced and it will now be possible to perform actions on the notification. The buyer will now be able to approve, reject or return a registration request. In addition, the buyer will also be able to forward or reassign the registration request to another buyer. There are three key sub-features that are also delivered as part of enhanced approval routing. The first one is on parallel approval. A notification will be sent to all users parallelly who are the approvers, which will help in reducing the cycle time of the approval process. The second feature is on position-based hierarchy support, wherein a notification will be sent to the person associated to that position, which will help in minimizing the workflow maintenance. The third feature is on viewer support, wherein a FYI notification can be sent to all the users who are involved with the registration process. So this helps in managing the supplier onboarding process better, and it drastically improves the productivity of the buying organization. The third enhancement is on reactivation of a rejected registration request. So before this enhancement, whenever a prospective supplier registration happens and for some reason the registration is rejected by the buying organization, then there is no provision to reopen a rejected registration request. But with this enhancement, it will now be possible for the buying organization to reopen a rejected registration request, request for more details and send a status link to the supplier organization. The supplier can provide the details and take the process forward. So what is the benefit that we get out of this? The communication process between the buying and the supplying organization becomes more effective, and more importantly, the supplier need not have to go through the process of re-registering all over again. So these are all some key enhancements that are delivered in the last 1 year. There are much more that are delivered. Maybe we can see all those things during the demonstration. Right. Let us now look at the key enhancements what we plan to deliver in the next 0 to 12 months planning cycle. Boilerplate updates. So this feature is being considered to improve the usability of the product. So most of the customers are looking for change in terminologies to the existing screens. So to give you an example, the existing terminologies like negotiation will be replaced as assessment, and requirements list will be replaced as questionnaire, and these changes would happen across all the pages and all the notification. So this would ensure that there are better terminologies and it will be easy for the customers to follow. Dependent qualification template. So the buying organization might be interested in evaluating the prospective supplier over a wide variety of questions or criteria. It makes perfect business sense to associate multiple questionnaires to a pre-qualification assessment. So with this enhancement, it will now be possible for the buying organization to associate multiple questionnaires to a pre-qualification assessment. Most importantly, all these questionnaires will get associated automatically based on the supplier profile or classification. This will help in improving the efficiency for both the buying organization as well as for the supplier organization as the process is becoming seamless. The next enhancement is on dependent questions in template. There is a need to define a parent-child relationship between different questions. So to give you an example, the buying organization might be interested in knowing whether the supplier organization has insurance in place for its employees. The response to that question can be a yes or no. When the response is yes, then the buyer would be interested in knowing the insurer, the expiry date and the insurance related details. When the response is no, then the buyer would be interested in knowing why there is no insurance in place. So with this enhancement, it will now be possible to establish a parent-child relationship between different questions, which will help in managing the supplier responses better. Let us now go into a short demonstration of the features that are to be delivered in the next few months. Let us now look at the simple demonstration of the supplier onboarding process, and we will also look at the key enhancements that are delivered in the last 1 year, as well as we will be looking into the enhancements what we are planning to deliver in the next 0 to 12 months. So, right, let us now look at the setups that are needed for defining dependent questions. So you might be knowing we talked about the need to define a parent-child relationship between different questions, right? So we will see now how it is being handled in the application today and how we will be able to define the parent-child relationship between different questions. Right. So what you see here is the questionnaire creation page where we are planning to bring in a new button called Manage Dependencies. So clicking on this button will help the user to establish a parent-child relationship between different questions or requirements. So as I was already mentioning, clicking that button will take you to a new screen where it will be possible to define the different relationship for the questions. To give you an example, so as you can see from the screen, the question is, are you listed on New York Stock Exchange? The response to that question from the supplier side can be a yes, no or applied for. So what is the dependent questions that need to be asked based on the response value, those things can be defined over here. So as you can see that if it is yes, there are a set of questions posed to the suppliers. If it is no, there is a different set of questions, and if it is applied for, there is a completely different set of questions. So with this, what we try to achieve, we are trying to bring in a better way of getting the responses from the supplier, which will help in improving the process as such. Now let us now look at the enhanced prospective supplier registration process, how the supplier onboarding process happens today, how the navigation happens, and what are all the enhancements that we have done in this flow to make it more usable and to make it more informative. So this is where the prospective supplier would come in and do the registration. As you can see, there is a train navigation that is being introduced here, which will help the supplier to navigate across different nodes to provide the required details. So we believe clubbing of information under different nodes will help in getting the information from the suppliers better, and it will obviously result in better user experience and navigation as such. So the basic information will first be captured, then it will be followed by the company details, where it will be possible for the prospective supplier to provide the details about the address, the contact details, the business classification, the product categorization, the bank related details. All these details can be provided by the supplier in the contact details node. In addition, it will now be possible for the suppliers to associate a contact to an address during the registration process. So this has been part of the new enhancements that are delivered in the last 1 year, where it will now be possible to make that association. In addition, it will be possible for the buyer administrator to control the user account creation during the registration process. Before this enhancement, whenever a prospective supplier registration happens, then a user account will be created by default, and that particular user account is being used as the login by the supplier to transact with the buyer. So there might not be any need to have a user account for some of the suppliers, and with this enhancement it is being controlled now, and it will now be possible for the buyer administrator to control creating user accounts. So once all the company related details are provided, then the prospective supplier can go on and provide additional information. This is the place where the buyer specific or the buying organization specific policy and guidelines can be enforced. So if there is a need to get additional details from the suppliers which are specific to any organization, then the same can happen, and you can have your own user defined attributes defined over here, which will help in capturing the additional details. So once all these additional details are provided, then the prospective suppliers can go ahead and provide the attachments as well. So the prospective supplier can associate documents which they think that needs to be reviewed by the buying organization. So we are also looking at enhancements to ensure we mandate prospective supplier to provide the attachments during the registration process. To give you an example, so if the particular supplier is of a minority owned supplier, then we would be interested in getting the minority owned certification from the supplier organization, and that can be mandated based on the supplier profile. So these things are planned for the future. So once all these details are provided by the prospective supplier, clicking on submit would ensure that this registration request is submitted and a notification will be sent to the buyer. So what you see here is the successful registration of prospective supplier that has happened. Then a notification will be sent to the buying organization for review. The buying organization will review and make appropriate changes as needed. So the next step what we are going to see is the review of prospective supplier registration by the buying organization. So the buyer will now be able to evaluate the registration request that has come from the supplier. So what you see here is the revamped supplier home page. So it will be possible for the buyer to perform all the actions from one single page. So the buyer will now be able to view the list of assessments that are published. It will be possible for the buyer to manage assessments, manage templates, create reusable list, manage responses. There is provision to go for a search. There is a keyword search that is available now, which makes the supplier search more effective, and there is a simple search as well which will help in searching for the suppliers. So the right corner of the screen you can see that the status of the registrations, the supplier registration, whether it happens by the buyer or if the prospective supplier registers by himself, it will now be possible to track the status of the request that has come in and its current status. So as you can see, the other point what we are talking about is the boilerplate updates, where we talked about changes that has happened, that is negotiation has been changed as assessments and requirements list has been changed as questionnaire. So all these changes has happened, and this page shows you all those changes. So once the modified terminology is in place, you have one single page which will be used to do all the changes whatever that is needed to be made. So once that happens, the other thing is on creation of any assessment, creation of a performance evaluation or a compliance audit. All these things can be initiated from this page. It will be possible to create reusable list, and it will now be possible for the buying administrator to track the status of the new registration request. So once the buyer clicks on to that particular hyperlink that is there in the previous screen, it takes them to this particular screen where the buyer will now be able to track the status, review the prospective supplier registration, and a status link can be sent to the supplier organization, and the supplier organization can track the status of the registration request through the link. So what we are going to do now is to review the registration request that has been submitted by the supplier, and we have to take the follow-up actions. So clicking on that review button icon over here in this page will take it to the new screen, where it will now be possible for the buying organization to associate a pre-qualification questionnaire. So if there is any additional details that are needed from the prospective supplier before onboarding the supplier into the system, it will now be possible by associating the pre-qualification questionnaire. So selecting this action will ensure that the questionnaires are associated automatically. So what you see here is the automatic association of questionnaire to the pre-qualification assessment. So how it happens? It happens based on the supplier profile data and classification. So we do have an option to define the questionnaires that needs to get associated to the pre-qualification assessment based on the supplier profile or classification, and based on those details these questionnaires would get associated automatically. So once this association happens, then this particular assessment or a pre-qualification assessment can be published, and you can see that once the assessment is published, the status will be updated to supplier to provide details, because this particular assessment is now being sent to the supplier, and it becomes the responsibility of the supplier to respond to that questionnaire before the buyer onboards this particular supplier. So you can see that the status is updated accordingly. The next step now would be for the supplier to respond to that particular questionnaire. So the prospective supplier is going to respond to that questionnaire. So that registration link is already been provided to the supplier. The supplier is going to use that registration link and respond to the questionnaires. You can see that there is a respond button available. Clicking on to that respond button will show the questionnaire. You can see that the different questionnaires whatever that are being defined and associated with that pre-qualification assessment will get displayed over here for the supplier. You can see that the dependent questionnaire you listed on New York Stock Exchange is always available over here. You can respond to that question. It can be a yes, no, or applied for. When the response is yes, you can see that the dependent requirements are automatically displayed over there. Similarly, if the supplier chooses to answer it as no, then you can see that dependent questions are automatically changing based on the response value provided. So this helps in managing the supplier responses better. So once this happens, and once the supplier submits this questionnaire, then it becomes the responsibility of the buyer to evaluate the response and approve the supplier. So the buyer comes in to evaluate the response provided by the supplier. The buyer administrator, you can see that the status, it's now in pending approval status because it was in supplier to provide more details and the supplier has provided the details. So it is with the buying organization to dispose this registration request. So that is the reason why the status is being displayed as pending approval. This is what the buyer administrator can do. The buyer administrator will have a complete control over the evaluation process, scoring process and everything. So the buyer administrator will now be able to manage evaluation, manage scoring teams, and then the buyer administrator can decide whether to onboard this supplier or reject this particular registration request. So the buyer administrator will have a complete control over what needs to be performed on that particular registration request. And we are also introducing a new responsibility called Supplier Management Evaluator, which will help the evaluation team to evaluate prospective supplier registration request or any assessment that happens for a particular supplier. So once this process happens, then it becomes a decision that needs to be taken whether to onboard this supplier or not. Once the buyer decides to onboard this particular supplier, then the action can be taken as approve, and clicking on go button will ensure that this supplier is being onboarded and a record will be created in the supplier master. So as you can see that the prospective supplier registration is approved and the supplier has been sent a notification, and in the meantime the supplier has been created as one of the supplier in the buyer database. So this is the complete flow of the onboarding process that is happening today, and this brings us to the end of the demo. Let us now look at the planned enhancements what we are planning to deliver in the next 0 to 12 months. So as you can see, these are all planned. Automatic initiation of assessment. So the buying organization might be interested in doing a performance evaluation for a supplier a month after the purchase order is released, or a compliance audit once in 6 months for a supplier. So it makes perfect business sense to initiate all these process automatically. That is, the performance evaluation or a compliance audit assessment, all these things have to be initiated automatically. So with this enhancement, it will now be possible for the buying organization to initiate performance evaluation as well as compliance audit automatically, which will help in reducing the human intervention. And in addition to it, the benefits what we get out of it, it increases the productivity of the buying organization, and more importantly, it improves the usability as well. End-to-end workflow automation of assessment. So as we are talking about automating the entire performance evaluation as well as the compliance audit process, we are also looking at ways to initiate the complete process of assessment, right from initiating the assessment to publishing those assessment, getting the evaluation from the different stakeholders, scoring those evaluation, locking those scores, completing the assessment, and updating the supplier profile with those data. So there are checks and balances that we are planning to ensure that notifications are being sent to the evaluation team as well as to the scoring team. And in addition, we are also looking at ways and means to ensure that all these works happen automatically without any human intervention. So this enhancement would ensure we have all the systems in place and the process is automatic and completely automated, which will help in reducing the human intervention, and more importantly, it will improve the productivity of the buying organization to a great extent. Dynamic invitation list. So this is again one of the key enhancements that is been planned for the next 0 to 12 months. What we are looking at is the invitation list what we have today. The invitation list what we have today is mostly static, and over a period of time this invitation list will lose its significance. With this enhancement, we are looking at defining a criteria and storing those criteria, and whenever an assessment is created, this criteria can be invoked, which will help in identifying the suppliers properly. So the benefit that we get out of it, the list what we have is going to be more relevant, and it is going to minimize the human intervention, and more importantly, we are moving away from the existing static list to a more dynamic and more usable list as such.
Okay, thanks Siva, that was great. So I'm now going to spend a few minutes just looking at some of the more longer term future direction solutions or features that we're planning to work on. And I don't intend to go through all of these in detail. We have a list on the slide here, and these are some of the, I guess, the ideas that we are keen on working on over the sort of the longer term process. So I just wanted to draw out maybe a couple of these and just talk to them specifically, and then I had a couple of slides that look at some of those in a bit more detail. So if I start actually at the bottom of the list, one of the key enhancements that customers have come back and talked to us about is really about the Supplier Hub solution and how there's a need to be able to store more data about suppliers' contact information. We have multiple customers who said, we love the way that you allow us to use Hub to extend all of the profile information for the supplier, but we really want to be able to do the same type of thing with the contacts that we work with at that supplier, because there's a lot of information that we need to store about those contacts, and that helps us run our business on a daily basis. So one of the enhancements that we're looking at is going to be to take the existing contacts and allow you to extend those and add as many attributes as you want to the definition of that contact to really help with the management of that type of information. And obviously as part of that, once it's added into the hub, then the ability for the supplier to keep some of that information up to date through the portal will also be part of that solution. In addition to that, one of the other areas that customers have talked to us about is the need to be able to provide a single face to the suppliers that they work with. And one of the issues we have in that area is that today, when you run the iSupplier portal solution, you're really looking at a single portal that has to be set up for each instance that you may be running. And this means that if you have multiple instances, you may have multiple faces for suppliers. We recognize that that's not necessarily an ideal situation. So one of the things that we're really interested in doing is taking some of the iSupplier portal capabilities and moving those onto the Oracle Supplier Network so that we can provide a single point of entry for suppliers so that they can log in and then see information actually across multiple buying organizations that they may be working with, but do that through a single doorway. As and when they need details, they would leave OSN and dive into the information on the individual supplier portals that the individual buyers may be running. But this would be great in terms of simplifying the relationship for suppliers to different customers that they work with that may be running Oracle's procurement and payables applications. So with those looked at, I'll now dive into just a bit more detail around some of the other enhancements that we're looking at. And a key one here is really how we help with compliance. One of the issues there is there are oftentimes lots of different documents that a buying organization may want to collect from the different suppliers that they work with, and being able to identify those and then prompt the supplier to provide those documents as part of their profile updates is really something very key. So one of the things we want to do is to enhance the attachment functionality that we have today, so that instead of just being able to ask the supplier to provide different documents and then provide an attachment area where they can upload them, we actually want to allow you to positively identify the different document types based on the type of supplier that you're working with, and so that will then drive the list of documents that you're looking for the supplier to upload. Obviously that's going to make it much easier for suppliers to understand what the requirements are, and then they'll be able to see whether they've provided all of the feedback that the buying organization is looking for. In addition to that, we want to use some of the features that Siva was talking about around the dynamic invitation lists in order to provide more flexibility around notifications. A lot of customers have come back and said that they want to be able to send messages to different communities of suppliers, and rather than have them maintain the lists of the suppliers that they would send those notifications to, we want to use the dynamic invitation list feature to actually be able to use that to drive the notifications out to those communities as well. The other area that we're keenly interested in making some enhancements on is really around the profile and the history of the supplier profile. We can see that whilst we provide interesting tools that allow suppliers to maintain the profile information, provide updates and have that reviewed internally by folks within the buying organization, one of the things that we want to add to that is a better tool for sort of tracking the traceability there, so that you'll be able to look back and see all of the updates that have been made across the supplier profile, whether they came from a supplier or whether they were generated internally over the course of time. So you can effectively see all the different versions of that supplier identity and look back across time to see all of that information. And again, that's something where customers have provided feedback suggesting that that would be a useful and powerful tool for them, so that's something that we're very interested in adding into the solution. Okay, I'm now going to switch gears a bit, and I'm just going to talk about the enablement process. So, within the life cycle, this is really the part of the process where you may have decided to establish a relationship with a supplier and you're looking to connect with them electronically. And if you remember from the early part of the session, we talked about the portal solution that we have in the Oracle Supplier Network. But now I was going to spend a few minutes just talking about one of the partner solutions that we position in this area, which is really designed to help with the challenges of connecting to large volumes of suppliers. And I guess one of the reasons that this is of challenge for a lot of organizations is that if you look at your typical supplier community, then you have a number of key suppliers at the top. You may do large volumes, they're technically sophisticated, they have an ability to exchange documents with you electronically. And then at the bottom you have a lot of suppliers that may do small volumes of business and therefore don't really want to connect with you electronically, and we have tools that will help you connect with them without needing them to set up XML or set up EDI or something like that. But the challenge in this is that you end up with a large volume of suppliers that are in the middle who still have an interest in being able to communicate and collaborate effectively, but there's no really easy solution for them to get connected into the buying organization, and therefore you're faced with the problem that they may still end up sending you in lots of different pieces of paper in order to maintain the relationship with you. So Transceptor are a partner of ours who have built a solution which is really designed to solve that massive middle problem of all these suppliers that aren't necessarily technically capable of conforming to the electronic document standards that you may have, and do too many transactions to really want to process those through a portal. So in terms of the relationship with Transceptor, we've now been working with them for, I think it's over 5 years. They actually achieved Oracle Validated Integration status back in 2011. And they're somebody that we work closely with because we think they have a good solution for helping suppliers get connected into buying organizations. So just looking at that in a little more detail, the way that they do this is that they provide a number of connection options to those suppliers, all of which require the supplier to perform no real IT work on their side, and effectively all of the mapping between the format of document that the supplier generates and what you require as a buying organization is managed by Transceptor themselves. So one of the key things here is that they have a fee structure that is also designed to encourage participation in any electronic collaboration process, because they only levy fees against the buying organization. Every supplier gets connected regardless of the volume of documents they're doing. They're connected for free. So with no technical issue as to why a supplier should connect and no fees charged in order to be able to do it, their solution proves to be very effective in getting large numbers of suppliers signed up and connected with the buyer. So just looking at how they do that in a little more detail, the different connection options that they offer are listed down the right-hand side of the slide here, and really they provide EDI or XML for those suppliers that have those capabilities. They will sign the suppliers up to iSupplier portal if they are doing such a low volume that they don't need a real electronic connection. And then in the middle ground, they will deal with email attachments or a virtual print driver that they will use in order to be able to extract the invoice details from a supplier and send those through to the buying organization in the format that the buyer needs. And I think the interesting thing here is they don't use any OCR technology. They're really extracting all of the invoice information with 100% fidelity from the supplier and then converting it to the buyer's format, passing it through the Oracle Supplier Network and sending that into the buying organization. So as I say, very, very interesting solution. We think it's a great complement to the platform that we provide with OSN, and really helps buying organizations to extend the number of suppliers that they're working with from a collaboration perspective. Okay, so thanks for joining us today. I hope you found the information that we presented to be useful, and we look forward to joining you again in the future. Thank you.